Hey everybody, welcome to CSAF 2021. My name is Karanbir Ahuja, and this is the one time you want to get writer's block. This will be a 30-ish minute crash course in digital forensics. I'll be going over some of the tools and techniques we do use in the field, why we do what we do, and unveiling some of the fog behind our day job. Speaking of day job, I'm currently an incident response consultant at Blackberry Silence. From day to day, I help companies put fires out after they've been breached and help them understand what happened while they got hacked or breached. Alongside that, I'm also the forensics lab manager for the global incident response practice. Any evidence that comes in, be it from Japan or Germany or down the street, comes to our lab in Irvine, California, where I handle all of the intake, storage, and processing of that data. Also, make sure our infrastructure, our forensics lab boxes are always, in tip-top condition, and I work on internal tooling. I also handle our FBIC just attestation. I can't speak that word, but essentially it means that we are clear to work with the FBI and other government agencies on top secret government work, or criminal casework. So we're certified to work with the government on anything special per se. Before here, I was a intern at Kaiser Permanente for 6 or 7 months on the electronic discovery and internal investigations team, which is essentially gathering in data for the senior investigators and paralegals to look at. Aside from my day job, I'm currently also a WRCCDC operations team member. WRCCDC is the Western Regional Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. Didn't muck that up. And basically, it's a competition where teams of students from various universities go into an environment and they try to survive against an attacking red team. And I know Cal Poly has a team, and if you're watching this, hi. I promise we're not doing anything too evil. Um, my role at WRCCDC includes handling the infrastructure for the competition as well as the environment for students. And I work with Red Team to make sure they have all the access they need to provide everyone with some laughs and enjoyable moments. I also handle the social media for the competition. So if you see something funny, that was probably me. So, what is digital forensics? Well, I'm sorry, I have to bore you guys with a textbook definition. I promise this is the only time in the presentation. But digital forensics is the recovery and investigation of data found on electronic devices. So, phones, laptops, the usual. Sometimes we get more exotic things like drones or cameras, where a client may need footage or photos pulled off. It does get a little more exotic than that. Sometimes they bring in a vehicle. They need to know that the person hadn't connected any personal devices and or didn't make any calls to a competitor while driving to make sure no one saw it. Some crazy story, but forensics doesn't necessarily limited to phones and computers anymore. It goes way beyond to vehicles and drones and video game consoles. Even it's fairly generic in the term electronic devices, but if it's electronic, there's a way to rip the storage off and take an image and analyze it somehow. Um, Sort of the nature of things. Um, if you take a digital forensics class at any university, including Cal Poly, you'll have a couple of things drilled into your head from the start. And the first one is to make sure the evidence is untainted. And a second golden rule is to make sure that your findings are unbiased. So if you've watched NCIS or CSI Miami, you'll know that during the crime scene, they take lots of photos to make sure they have a replica of the original crime scene, and they wear gloves to make sure they don't contaminate the crime scene. We do the same thing and similar things in digital forensics. We take steps to ensure that the original evidence is not altered in any way. So that's rule one, is that you make sure the evidence is not tainted. And rule two is you make sure the findings are unbiased. So when you're done with a case or an engagement, and I'll use these terms interchangeably, you generally give a report to the client, or if you've drawn the short straw, in my opinion, you have to give expert testimony in front of a court of law. When you give that report or you give that testimony, you have to make sure that you are extremely unbiased, and you make sure you cannot make any suggestions or any sort of guesses as to what may have happened. It's quite different from incident response, whereas in incident response, you're allowed to guess and say, hey, we think the threat actor, the attacker, the bad guy, came in from this vector, and they were on this machine, and we think they went to these boxes. And we think that they took credentials. When forensics, you have to see the proof there. So you have to see that someone logged into an account, opened Internet Explorer. Whoops, they opened Internet Explorer and they went to Facebook. The way you would word that in a report or to a client or on the witness stand, whatever they call it, someone used the user account or someone used Gene's user account to launch Internet Explorer and navigate to Facebook. You can't say that Gene used it because you don't know that Gene was actually sitting at the device or using the device. You don't know if it was someone else. So you have to keep everything very factual. You can't make any suggestions, even as minor as that. You have to pay attention, to your grammar, what you say and what you do. Sometimes you'll only do the collection of the evidence and you'll just hand it off to an electronic discovery specialist who will then go through and look for specific things like IP infringement. It just depends on the case and what the client wants. That's a quick overview of the nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty itself, digital forensics can be broken down into 5 stages. The first of which is seizure. Seizure is the intake or the actually getting the evidence, be it a phone or a computer, what have you. Generally, if you've seen CSI or whatever, kind of FBI going in, hey, we need, your laptop, surrender it now. That would be the crime scene, quote unquote. They're gathering the evidence or taking photos of it, so on and so forth, or they find it at a crime scene. That's why we're FBI CJIS approved. If that happens and we need to deal with something like that, we're ready to go. Most often, 99% of the time, we just have a client, straight up pop this in a FedEx mailer and, yep, pop this thing in a FedEx mailer and ship it out to us. It's glitching in the camera screen. Sometimes, they'll mail it out and everything needs to be kept under lock and key and made sure that no one messes with it. So if evidence is in transit, it needs to be encrypted. It comes with a chain of custody. So what that chain of custody is it has the laptop's, information as well as who had it at what time and why it was transferred. So in this instance, I have my MacBook here. We'll say that the client had the MacBook in Chicago, Illinois at 1900 UTC. I'm just making up times. So that'll be written 1900 UTC seized from, employee. And it'll continue down the chain. Dropped off at FedEx, retrieved by me, taken in for imaging, put in storage, returned to client. Every single little step or every single little transfer is written down because you have to make sure that the evidence isn't tampered with, as I mentioned before. And you do that, as best as you can. Sometimes when, you're shipping it, you obviously can't keep your eyes glued to it. So that's why you have the chain of custody, and that's why you make sure it's encrypted so no one can actually intercept the evidence and alter it. Because it's encrypted, they can't. The time it'll take to decrypt is too lengthy, put it that way. Sometimes we have to go on site. Pack your bags. We're going to Miami. Cheers the joy from the team. OSC Industrial District. We only have 12 hours to image 5 machines or 20 machines. Damn, no time to have fun. We have tools that we bring on site, and they're similar to what we use in our lab in Irvine. But the long and short of it is, we are ready to go to image evidence wherever and in most, if not all, conditions. Every piece of evidence, like in the TV shows, photos, we make sure we don't tamper with it. It's sealed up in evidence bag, signed off with the chain of custody, yada yada yada. So we operate very much like a forensics lab used by the government, especially with the attestation. But you got to make sure that the evidence isn't altered in any way, shape, or form. Got the evidence. Now what? Now you have to make a copy. We call this imaging, where we make a copy of the evidence. I have 2 photos here. This bottom one right here is a Tableau PCIe bridge. Tableau is sort of the go-to company for forensics bridges. This one is specifically for NVMe drives or super fast solid-state drives. This one right here is actually a full-blown computer with a built-in write locker. We take something like this to client sites to image evidence if need be, and it has the same tooling we use in the lab, just in a compact form factor that we put in a Pelican case. These forensic bridges are also called write blockers, and as the name implies, it prevents anything from being written to the evidence drive or the evidence in question. Again, we need to make sure that the evidence isn't altered in any way, and so this physically prevents anything from being written. We can't even change a 0 to a 1. Sometimes, and it's fairly rare, we'll get a pre-made image by the client, so the client already has the device imaged. They happen to have the exact same hardware, and it's faster for them to upload it to us rather than mail it, even if it is priority overnight. Although that's far and few in between. There's also a myriad of file types. The same way we have different document types, we have different image types. The go-to in the industry is this top one, EO1. In case evidence file, what's unique about this one, as well as the AAF compared to any others, say this .raw. The .raw is these are all bit for bit copies, but the .raw is a raw copy. There's nothing special about it. It's just we've copied the physical pieces of the hard drive, physical sectors or blocks into a file. There's no checksumming or verification of it. You can do verification with outside tools, but the EO1 has it built in, and it's also inherently you can't write to evidence in EO1 file, so that makes sure the evidence isn't altered. But I'll take a step back. I mentioned checksumming. What is checksumming? Well, every file, however small or large, has a unique signature or a checksum. If it's a photo and you change 1 pixel, or if it's a text document and you change a T to a L, the entire signature changes. And it's not like a simple change like, oh, the first part of the signature changed 3 characters. No, it completely changes. And so this applies for any file. If it's an image file and you flip even 1 sector out of 1,000,000, the entire checksum changes. And that's how you verify your file's integrity. If it's getting copied or you're imaging it, you'll take a checksum of the starting image or the evidence in question, and you'll compare it with the ending checksum. And if they match, you're good to go. If they don't match, something got botched. Be it, maybe a flaky USB connection, or your hard drive inside your forensics box is failing, or maybe even the evidence has a failing hard drive, or there's a hard drive that's failing. These things happen, although fairly rarely. And so it's up to the investigator or the analyst to make sure that the evidence is safe and sound, preferably in that EO1 where you can't edit it, and all the checksums match to make sure that no one's altered it. Another golden rule during imaging is that we make multiple copies of the image. We'll have one on offline or cold storage, and we'll have one on the forensics box that we're using to analyze the evidence, and we'll store the original evidence in our evidence locker or evidence safe. We only work on the copy. We do not want to even mistakenly somehow alter the original evidence. That would be game ending, essentially. So always work on the copy, and you do your utmost best to make sure nothing is written to the evidence, and that's fairly easy. You use an EO1 file, and the software that we use to analyze the evidence doesn't actually write to the evidence. Speaking of software, how do we do analysis? Well, there are dozens of tools for doing analysis of evidence, and they vary depending on the application. The ones I have listed here, Magnum Axiom, NCIS, FTK, X-Ways, Autopsy, are some sort of the big heavy hitters if you're doing normal Windows or even Linux, Mac OS, phone forensics even for some of these. But if you want to do phone forensics, Cellebrite is a company that has been on the news quite recently and often. And they make some of the leading tools for mobile forensics. Mac OS used to be under a company called Blacklight, but they got bought out by Cellebrite. It's all one company, but depending on the application, you'll choose a different tool. A lot of these tools, if you're taking a forensics class, most likely you will be using NCIS or FTK. Those are sort of the 2 old dogs. They've been around for ages. They work. They've been tested, tried, and proven. Not to say that the other tools haven't, but just these tools have a legacy and a history. And the the person analyzing the evidence will use one of these tools, get the evidence out, and then they have to verify their findings with another tool. Or ideally, they'll verify their findings with another tool. The reason we do this is to make sure that we're not making a mistake when presenting our evidence. We don't want to have an issue where the software's interprets a timestamp or a date and time registry on a file incorrectly, which does happen sometimes, and it actually completely changes the evidence. So that's why we verify using multiple tools. There's some forensics artifacts, especially in Windows, where different tools will read it differently, and so you want to verify multiple times. And that's sort of one of the key things is you need to make sure, again, nothing is altered throughout all of this. If you're using a tool like NCIS, FTK, X-Ways, it'll be a lot of hex, and your throat will be hoarse from screaming, and your eyes will be bleeding, because it's really not the most user-friendly interface. These tools are designed for function over form. Axiom is very unique in that it's designed to have a very good mix of form and function. It's a modern UI, and does the same job. They all perform the same job of looking at the evidence, but they each come with their own sort of little bits of flavor. So Axiom will quote unquote process the evidence for you, and it'll dig out its findings. So it'll say, we found 183 PDF documents, 39 Word documents, 10 Excel spreadsheets, web history from Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, sorry. And we also found evidence of people plugging in USB drives, and this is the USB, yada yada. So it'll categorize everything for you. It has its own AI engine to, if you're looking for something specific, if you're looking for IP theft, it'll have some AI engine for that. It's fairly unique in that regard. NCIS and the other tools do have a similar capability, but it's not as baked in as Axiom. NCIS, FTK, X-Ways, these are what we call, or what I like to call, the hardcore tools, where it's sort of, the ways that you do everything manually. They have some scripting / automated capabilities, but most of the time you're digging stuff out manually with, a pick or a small thing to get all the small bits out. Autopsy is unique on this list in that it's free. So you can go home and download this and start playing around yourself, and it'll be a great window into, what we do if you have a test image. There's other tools, like I mentioned, like Celebrite or Oxygen, which are good for mobile forensics. Not to say that the other tools can't do mobile forensics, but these tools are sort of catered towards it. So sometimes you'll choose different tools for different tasks. Sometimes we'll get to the nitty gritty. Sometimes we have to carve a file out. So I have a diagram here, and I see it's partially covered by my face, or rather the Zoom background. I'm sorry about that. Zoom background, the video background. Right here, you guys might see in the red, this is this hard drive here is split into blocks or sectors, and I'll just go by blocks. And this red is a mycontent.xls or spreadsheet. So this thing takes up 4 blocks on the hard drive. Cool, it's there. No one's messed with it. What happens when you right-click delete? When you right-click delete, what the operating system does, in this case, we'll go with Windows. Windows says, hey, this area is, there's nothing here. Anything can take over this area and write its own information on it. So if I had an image where someone did right-click delete, but they didn't write anything over it, I can go in and I can see, oh, it's just sitting there, no one's messed with it. I can get the entire file out. Well, because Windows marks it as a free space, sometimes something will write over it. So in this case, this has a Word document, new file.doc, and it took over 3 out of 4 blocks on the spreadsheet. So 3 out of 4 blocks are this Word document, and the last block is the spreadsheet. So sometimes you'll be tasked with trying to dig any information out of the remnants, and sometimes you can get information, sometimes you can't. It is very much case by case and luck basis, to where how much you can get out of it, if anything. And that's what we call carving, because we're physically carving that evidence out of those blocks. Then on the bottom left of that diagram, we have a data wipe cleaner shredded, which is the fun, unrecoverable bit. There are some tools like Dark's Boot Nuke or DBAN, which will erase an entire hard drive, write zeros, write ones, write random stuff on every single block on the hard drive to make sure you can't recover any data. Anytime from like 1 pass and zeros all the way up. I think there's like an option for 72 passes to make sure that there's absolutely nothing recoverable on that hard drive. Sometimes you'll just have, like a Word document overwrite those 4 blocks, and at that point, there's nothing left over because it's been overwritten by the Word document, or it's been overwritten. That set of sectors has been overwritten so many times and at so many different points, it's just gibberish. So that's you can't carve that out, but a large portion of our job is if we have to is carve those pieces of evidence out and present it to the client. Speaking of presentation to the client, we got to get ready for that. So one of the main things that we do in not only incident response but digital forensics is timelining. This is a timeline that's taken from a test image by Digital Corpora. It's the M57 Business Exfil, I believe, case. This is a free image you can get online from digitalcorpora.com or .net, if I remember correctly. But essentially, it's a Excel document. You've got a date column, a time column. I believe that's sort of the permission set on the file, or the MACE values for time attribution. I'm like blanking out, but you've got the MACV column, the source type, the type, and the short explanation of it. We use Excel a lot, quite a lot. It's easy to filter through if you're looking for certain things. You can also see PDFs or HTML or Word documents seen in the field. And this carries anything from events that occur, event logs on the system, to user activity, to files, etc. And sometimes we'll highlight events based on importance. If working in an incident response case, we'll highlight things like the threat actor, logging on. If we're working a corporate espionage case on a forensics case, we'll highlight some history, internet history and upload history, network history of someone uploading, if we can, certain documents to Mega, Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever. So, we choose what we highlight based on what kind of case we're working. In this case, they've chosen red to highlight execution of programs, green, light green for the creation and access of documents, dark green is some registry stuff, and black is OS processes. So in this case, this timeline essentially goes on July 20th, 2018 at 1:27:40, and I'll make the assumption that this is Zulu time or Greenwich Mean Time, UTC. It's sort of our de facto standard. It's at 1:27 Zulu. Someone executed Excel. In this case, I don't have any information on what account they used, but someone executed Excel, and they either accessed or created m57biz.xls. I'm pretty sure this is a created, but not 100% sure just based off the information here. So they created it at 1:28 Zulu, 20 seconds after they opened Excel. While they were in it, some stuff executed, and at 1:28 Zulu, created that. So right here, they created the shortcut link for that, and they saved it, and it gets saved in various different places. And so this will go on up until Firefox opened, website accessed, Dropbox, and then we'll see memory traffic via network logs that may be present. Again, it just varies based on what we have, but that's sort of the timeline that we give to clients. Finally, you're at the end of the long road, and it's time to make the report and detail the impact. The report details what the user or threat actor did. It'll essentially say, okay, someone logged in using these accounts and they did this. Okay, cool. It'll also detail what impact it might have on the organization if we're requested to do that. So it'll say, we saw finance department, social security.xls or xlsx, what have you, uploaded to Dropbox. Okay, that's pretty bad. Someone just leaked social security numbers to someone. That's a pretty big impact. Sometimes it'll be, we didn't see anything nefarious. We didn't see any espionage or exfil or anything of the sort. This person was, working. At most, they were on Amazon or Facebook. We see evidence of that. Not much of an impact for the organization. And we'll also have future mitigation steps if the client requests it. So if the client goes, hey, how do we prevent files from being exfiltrated? Well, there's data loss protection programs that exist that make sure that nothing is deleted. If you're using a cloud provider like Outlook or sorry, OneDrive, Microsoft, that has its own tools. Same thing with Google on the admin side. They all have various tools to prevent that sort of stuff or monitor that sort of stuff. And we'll say, hey, pipe it out to a security monitoring tool so you know when something gets uploaded or links shared or something like that. On the right here, I have a sort of high level outline of a report. We'll start off with a table of contents because these reports tend to be books, and table of contents are great to keep track of everything. You'll have the executive summary, which is a very high level, not as detailed summary of what happened for executives and people who just want to see the high level, 50-foot view. Uh, that would be something like on June 2015, Blackberry Silence received a laptop to investigate possible corporate espionage. We found evidence of, let's say, Sally uploading files to multiple file sharing websites and yada yada yada, boom, done. Okay, the next portion will be the technical analysis. That'll be where we include the nitty gritty stuff. Like in this timeline, it shows cell was open, da da da. That'll have all the details of they uploaded files from documents, photos, videos, and they uploaded their files from OneDrive, so on and so forth. And that can get pretty nitty gritty. And then we have recommendations for the digital forensics cases that we get. This one kind of sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. It depends on the client's request. A lot of recommendations like use better monitoring tools or set up your monitoring properly to make sure you don't have any exfiltration, to practicing good sort of cybersecurity hygiene or what have you. Recommendations like least privileged access, to where an employee only has privilege to the documents they need and nothing else. So Sally from marketing can't get into the finances departments because she's in marketing. Clearly, there's no overlap there. Make sure she only has access to her stuff, or if they're a C-level, they don't necessarily need access to every single thing under the sun. That way, if they get compromised or they decide to exfiltrate information, they don't have everything. They only have what's pertinent to their job. And lastly, the appendix, which would contain the timeline, as well as any relevant artifacts. Like maybe we pulled out certain documents that were directly referenced in the technical report or the executive summary. They would be there. And that's a separate item. They're labeled when we give them to the client. Hey, this appendix, you had a file named corporate espionage doc, right? And so, long story short, you have your appendix with your supporting documents. And finally, you've completed your first or one of many digital forensics cases. I see we're about 2 minutes short, and I'll be hanging around in the chat afterwards to answer any questions. But, that was the end of the presentation. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of CSAF and get some learning out of it, and hopefully take some new information home. Thank you.